Today, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, August 14th, and this is a meeting of the Senior Center Site Selection and Building Committee. This meeting will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting or hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast, unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom at meeting ID 375-414-6055 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100 prior to the meeting. All right, so I call us to order at 6:02 p.m. I would like to offer an amendment to the agenda. I just forgot to put approval of the last minutes from 7:29. So can I get, or any other amendments before we do a motion? Can I get a motion to amend the agenda to include the July 29th? I move. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Wonderful. All right, great. Thank you. All right, so has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes from July 29th? Those went out last week or so, and then again in yesterday's reminder email, just like a brief summary of the public engagement plan that we discussed, kind of just getting the wheels turning.
I'll make the motion we approve the meeting minutes of the Senior Center Site Selection Building Committee meeting July 29th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I apologize for not having the minutes from the 24th. I totally forgot about them, but they're done now.
All right, and I'll get those out to everybody. Thank you for doing those, Carolyn, and we'll get those for the next meeting. Speaking of which, who would like to take their turn doing the minutes from the recording for this meeting?
I'll do them.
Thanks, Bill.
All right.
Don't all jump at once.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't take the quietness from the crowd. You have to speak
I
up.
can't talk, so
There you go, there you go.
I failed to go twice.
I used to teach it.
All right,
ASDFJKL semicolon space bar. That's about as far as I can get.
There you go.
do you want to start off with a summary of the test pits?
Sure. Yeah, so discussion of the test pit. So I think it was on August 1st, we advanced the test pits out at both sites. So we started out at the brush dump site and we advanced 2 of the ones over there out of the 5. The other 3 are in a wooded area and the access with the backhoe wasn't possible. What we have to do if we want to move forward with those is we'll have to cut down a few small trees and use the mini excavator to get back there, which the water department has. So that's why there's only 2 over there at this time. 115 Washington Street, you can see we got most of those done. We eliminated, there was, I think, 1 inside the existing stormwater basin. We didn't do that. And there was 1 on the other, kind of the north side of the stormwater basin, northwest. So towards Washington Street, we didn't do that one because the access wasn't really possible. But we were able to still do several out in that area. So I think, in short, we really kind of confirmed, verified, and saw what we expected at both locations. So at the brush dump, we went down as deep as the backhoe could go, 11 feet, and we were in sand the whole time at both test pits over there. And then at the 115 Washington Street, we would hit refusal anywhere from 4.5 to 7.5 feet. And it was mostly sandy material above that. And you can see that in the test pits.
Excuse me, you hit refusal?
Oh, yeah, refusal basically means we ran into boulders or ledge and we couldn't dig in. Something was stopping us from digging any further. That's refusal. So it was boulders, ledge that stopped us from digging any deeper. So, I thought there was more cover there than I expected above the ledge.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and, I think in short, that's kind of what those proved. I think now that we have that data and I can work with John or we can as a group to understand what that means for the construction of the center and.
Well,
Forward.
we felt it looked extremely good. If you wanted to come join us in Long Meadow, you would have seen how awful it could have been. This is really good material. Because it was sandy, we had no real sign of, it was dryish, we had not had a lot of rain.
Right,
And
yeah,
so
we did
there's-
not encounter groundwater in
Yeah.
any of the test beds, just.
And eventually, prior to construction, we would do that probably again to look at the soil condition to see where groundwater may have been, because soil analysis, the guys who are certified in that can see where there might have been groundwater at one time. But right now, that promotes good news because number one, we have to maintain a lot of the water that's generated off hard surfaces on this site. And that means that if we end up with chambers underneath our parking lot or other places, it should work very well. I don't think we perked that day. We were just digging around, but
No,
the sand was dry, very reasonable condition for in terms of drainage. In terms of hitting refusal over at Washington Street, if I believe most of it was 4 feet or lower. I think most refusal, which is good because our foundations are set at 4 feet, maybe 4.5 feet. At the time when actual construction drawings are done, we would also recommend geotechnical drilling, more specifically where you want to go. But this is really this is what we wanted to see when we dug that. And Dan came back with a lot of the pictures, and I think we got a report from. I
Yeah,
don't know whether that report was handed out or not, but
it was, yeah.
I would say both sites in terms of soils are good. Not a problem. I don't see a problem.
Yeah, and I'd add to that too, our water utilities, we typically go 5 feet minimum cover. So, there might be some rock removal, but nothing significant as we might have expected, maybe not as bad as we expected. And, and sewer as well, we typically have 4 feet of cover for that when it's past the building area. Just to add to depth and what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and as discussed last time, utilities, I think one of the positive things that came out of this, that Dan brought up at the Harvard Washington site was the issue of running into extensive ledge for utilities. It appears that we may run into some issues for the water lines, but all in all, I don't think it's too bad. And on the brush site, our utilities are more of an issue, but everything is doable depending on what we're willing to pay. So that's all good news. I thought Dan came back very positive.
Yeah, I thought so too. And when we, like, for example, we reconstructed High Street a few years ago, and there was a significant amount of rock that we had to remove, and they basically chiseled that out. And it was probably more than you would need to do for this site, and it wasn't a significant cost, in my opinion, but I could use that to identify what we might be looking at based on our current data, but.
And I do believe we're still okay about dealing with the existing retaining pond or retaining area for the school. I think one of our sites is the park.
You can get in between around the fence.
Yeah, but I think that pond was dry at the time.
It was.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
means it drains well too.
It's straight.
I don't think I've ever seen ponded water in it, but I don't check it often.
That's always a good sign
Yeah.
because that means it's sucking down the water.
Yeah.
Something we like to do. So I think as far as both sites, in terms of constructability, they're quite reasonable.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the most recent, it looks like you, redid the traffic flow to no longer exit onto Groton Harbor.
Which, is this the Washington Harvard Street?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. We,
We haven't finished the test pits. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Not finished.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Okay, so before we get off the test pit stuff, we certainly have to thank the DPW for their cooperation
Yes,
and sending the operator out and the excavator. So that was no cost.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing.
So that was a big deal.
we always recognize DPW.
But what I found interesting, I did go out and watch the, Groton School Road, not Groton School, Groton Road and Washington Street stuff. Cause it's right down the street from my house. And the operator, he must have talked to you, right? The gentleman running the backhoe. He did like 20 odd holes higher up when they did the schoolwork. The same operator that worked the other day was using this on the site further up the land when they were doing the digging for the school expansion, the field expansion, I should say. So he was really surprised that he didn't hit any junk, because he said he hit all kinds of material further up.
Often when you go up, there's a reason why you're going up. There's something hard down there somewhere.
It was very good. I appreciate it. Sorry.
No, all right, no, that's.
anything else on the test pit results? I mean, it seems to me it doesn't eliminate either one of the sites, so that's positive.
Correct.
All right, do we want to move on to the alternate site layout? So there's two alternate ones. So there was the first one that came out a week or so ago that had the two layouts up by the practice field. And I'm not sure I printed those. And then the one that just came out yesterday that included the alternate traffic flow.
Yeah.
Both in and out of Washington.
We discussed this at some length in the office and briefly with one of our civil engineers, and the general gist was to get both entrance and exit on the same side, not to avert confusion as to was this the entrance to the senior center or not. So it becomes a lot clearer for especially people who may have, get a little confused, so we tried to make it simpler. And on the Harvard Groton Street, so I'm looking at Washington Street, we offset the exit to be a little bit farther from, we wanted to get down from the intersection. It's always good to have a fairly good length as you're exiting, more important as you're entering, because you tend to want to slip out in front of somebody. So what we did is if we came straight out, we'd be very close to that intersection, and we wanted to stay down from that. And as this develops, it could be that the entire site would slide slightly more in order to get a little bit farther away. Intersections always make us nervous. The road has a really decent view shed on it in both directions, which is really critical for safety for older drivers, none of which we all, certainly you're not. So that's kind of what it is. And then it's set up to be the south, even though we're up near the higher areas, the south side of the building is the more transparent side, has the outdoor patio, and we have drop-offs in front of it. It's for some reason, I think the building shifted a bit in this print. It's supposed to be more over here. I don't know what happened.
Okay, so
It's supposed to be more here because I think something moved on when he was setting this up. But the building is, that entrance is supposed to be here.
In line. with the
Yeah,
driveway.
I don't know why it got, I'll make sure we get that corrected when it gets out.
So
Because
So
this,
Robert, is the screen
Look,
sharing
just
working? Can you
clarification,
see
John.
that?
yeah,
when we were in the field, he indicated that one of these was supposedly in the elevator shaft location.
yeah,
Do we know which one it was of these three?
that's probably this.
No, I think it is in the right place. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, but I don't know whether they did the test pit there or whether this whole thing could have been shifted. Either something's happened here because this is the front door and the front door is here. These guys line up with, the handicap lines up with the service side of the building. So there's something a little miss with that. And I don't have Dan here to complain to him, so. Yeah, yeah, see, if you go to this guy, you see what I mean.
This was it here, this was the first one.
Yeah, you see what I mean.
That's Bishop Road.
Yeah.
That's different.
No,
I know this is Bishop Road, but I'm saying that that's the relationship that this
you want
has with
that high
that.
point in the center of the.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So for some reason, that little guy, he's much better there.
This was the one
Yeah.
you had before.
Yeah. And for some reason, I think he left it where it was and shifted this. But this is in the right place. This needs to
Because on
be,
this one, you have exit, you have the exit going out to.
yeah, this needs to be
That's not
swung.
even the same.
This needs to be swung a little bit.
Yeah.
He left, no, yes, we upgraded this to do that. He didn't move this. I can see that now. So if I took my little pen, like,
See how it's here?
yeah, this is the way it's supposed to be. With these guys like this and this, it's like at this point.
Yeah, you sent that out.
Yeah.
But there was something that happened in the field. but I forgot.
And I can be blamed for that because I made him make an adjustment to it. The day before yesterday, what day is it? On Monday. I
So it's
adjusted
just the
that.
drawing that's incorrect.
Yeah,
It's not
it's
the
ju-
test pits that were. okay.
No, this guy is correct. This guy should have been more like that.
Just to follow back to the test pits for just a minute, and the same discussion.
Yeah.
When we were out there, I asked him to do, this is test pit 3A over
Yeah.
here. You gotta mark as A. But the report came on it.
Yeah,
So
we should-
I asked him to go 34, 32, whatever feet right there, because this is the least grade and exposed to the sun the better.
Mhm.
So I asked him, can you do one more over there, which they kindly agreed to do. So I'd like to consider, the whole thing moving that way a little bit too, because this is so steep. I'm afraid it would get blocked up by some of the trees in the back. That would be the idea. But
Yeah, we'll get that cleaned up. But the idea was to try and get both on the same side rather than creating a lot of extra movement around. And then on Bishop, it's a little bit more straightforward. But it's a straight shot on a much quieter road. And there's both a plus and a negative. Plus is that it's quieter, the negative is it's a little bit farther out of the action, if you will, in town. And both sites, no matter where we dug, were pretty good. This one had no issues.
Yeah.
And the other one had a few, but they're deep enough that, I think we're okay. Even if we dug somewhere else, I think we'd fine, unless you went up.
Yep.
The hill. And, and in terms of vegetation, there's a lot that can be done about the vegetation as we work through this. There's trees that we want to save and trees that we might not want to save. But I think that report works well, and I think what you want to do is think about our idea of, one of the problems we have with our elder centers is making sure we have safe access in and out. And the one thing we do is, we've been doing it for about 25 years as architects, is that we like to have one way in and one way out. It takes about 2 weeks for everybody to figure that out. We have lots of signage, but people learn that this is where I exit and this is where I enter. Because in the past, we've had problems or seen problems from other centers where people are getting too close together. And some of us don't stay in line. And as my team says, when they ride with me in the car, I'm one of them. that does.
So when you're basically saying, John, that instead of having, let's say we went here and we had a double barrel entry with an island up the
Yeah.
middle. That you would still recommend going to two rather than splitting this, conservatively, so you would have a general idea that you're going in and coming out.
Well, the nifty thing here is that when you come in like this,
I see that.
you're exiting out on the passenger side to the building. And,
Take-
and when you stick them together, it gets a little bit trickier. You have to peel off people. And what'll happen, well,
Yeah,
it gets confusing. And we just find that this way, it's a good example is Long Meadow. I've talked to, it's now been there for 3 or 4 years. Talked to them extensively, and they have found the parking lot, when it first opened, was confusing for everybody. And now they say it works exactly the way they wanted it. Plus, we park them, really important to park them where cars stop without getting over the line and into the other parking space. So we create a walk area that's safe from the parking zone, and there'll be crosswalks here. And it just, we're very careful in our parking. A lot of people don't think much about parking, they don't get too deep into them. The other two thing I'll probably mention is we do make our parking spaces 9.5 feet wide. And
Where's the plow guy? Who's gonna plow it? And let's get his opinion on.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah,
Doug.
I'll tell you a little secret
That's
about my,
that's the guy that you really wanna talk to, is the guy that's gonna move the snow in the winter time.
Yeah. he probably has to plow about 10 times. And so if you change your whole parking lot for 10 plows,
Times 25 years, it's 200.
yeah,
So John, if we do we do an entrance and an exit, right?
yes,
I mean, if we did one, what's the cost comparison? We're gonna do 2 street cuts. I mean, we're gonna, 2 roads, I mean,
Pretty
we're talking pennies.
pretty insignificant, yeah. We do this all the time. We've never had a big issue with it. You'll see this in Wilbraham. We enter and exit where they do for the town hall, entering one way and out the other. That's already was there. But in Long Meadow, we've done it this way. And all of the other sites we've done it this way. And
So how does everyone feel about this latest building position with, I mean, it's relatively the same building position, but with both entry and exit off of Washington Street as compared to the one that's the single piece of paper, front and back, that's printed, which are the alternate layouts that I believe Ken and Dennis had asked for after our last meeting that were up closer to the practice field. Did everyone have a chance to look at those and see?
Well, I like the idea of going in and out on Washington Street, because it's just for dealing with traffic personally, because I live close by there. And I feel we'd have to have some kind of traffic mitigation on Harvard Groton Road. It's just, there's curves you can't see, there's people coming really fast through there, whereas Washington Street is much easier. And in some cases, they have the school zones up and, I think it would be safer. Now, I like it up there more than I like it down here, also because there's less parking spots. In the ones that are lower, I think there's like 40 or 60 spots as opposed to 100,
Right,
which I think is not enough.
moving it near the practice field dramatically decreased the number of parking spots. So the layouts that are in the stapled packet are the ones that include it down at the triangle, sort of at the bottom of the Groton Harvard Road one, and then the layouts that are printed front and back with no staple. Those are the 2 alternate layouts, putting it up by the practice field. That's.
oh,
So one's, so yeah,
What?
We don't have any testing, unfortunately, up by the practice fields either.
No.
So that's an unfortunate situation.
well, we can always do some. I mean,
So I,
Dan can't wait to get the backhoe back out
The
there.
Bruce can do it, or the highway guy.
What's the, I thought there was another one that showed the one of, remember, I don't know if it's on that, both sides, yeah. I thought there was one up by the practice field that parking on either side of the building, was that last week?
I didn't see
I don't-
that one.
I
I
don't
think there were
think we
just
have-
two alternates, right?
We just had it up only on one side. Other than the handicap parking and service.
Right, yeah.
And knowing a little bit about Harvard Groton Road and, you know, the entrance to the transfer station, it looks to me like this alternative one where you know, you might have the same site issues that you do coming out of the transfer station.
Which isn't good, right?
Line of sight issues, yeah.
Yeah,
That's really tricky.
it's hard to tell in here, but, because you're at the top of the hill, but I don't know if you do get, yeah, what the site distance is.
Problem I have with the Washington Street two entrances, so you're proposing at this one to my, the left, if you look at the drawing to the left, it would be the south, I guess.
That's the entrance.
So I, the only issue I think with this is gonna be coming down. Down the hill too fast. Take a turn. That.
Yeah, Ken, I don't think I think Washington Street and Groton Harbor Road they're both busy streets no matter what. I don't care what you say. They're both busy.
Right, I'm talking about as you approach it, when you're in a high spot over here, it's a little flatter at the top by the you know, trucking company. But Washington Street, that's pretty steep as you're coming right down there.
I think that for
Take a
some,
turn to the right.
I think that for some of the seniors, going downhill in inclement weather, you know, and then having to stop to take the right, or it's just, I mean, it's obviously, well, it's a steep hill, let's say, or a pretty serious downgrade. So if you're coming from that end of town, you're gonna have to be going downhill, then to take the right and then back uphill, which in inclement weather might be, you know, dissuasive for wanting to go out.
Could add a lane there. That's the other option, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, you could also probably do some kind of speed mitigation.
Yeah.
Not that anybody pays attention, but
Yeah.
it could.
So we're talking a lot about Groton Harbor Road, Washington, whatever you want to call it. Are we kind of leaning towards that as our
Well-
Well, we just hadn't gotten to the other one yet.
Here's the other one. And the reason why probably that got a little bit more is because, as Dan has pointed out, utility issues. We have gas, electric, water, sewer right there. We don't have sewer here. Electric's a bit of a challenge. I think it would be propane, right? Do we have, you gave us some numbers.
Yeah,
The one that was a shocker was the power. I think it was $1 million.
yeah,
That makes me kind of twinge a little bit.
We said we're looking at 1.2, 1.4 million to do
Utility,
and we were talking $250,000 utilities to do Groton Harbor Road.
yeah,
Significant difference.
yeah. In fact, even $250,000, I think is conservative. But that's good. I'd rather be conservative. Because as we dug around, there might be some rock in the way, but I think there's a lot less than we thought.
yeah, and talking with my guys who've done digging back there, it's been, they call it sugar sand, it's just a very sandy area, so it's really confirmed what we thought. We didn't, you know, obviously we
Yeah.
missed 3 of the test pits.
But we also looked at the soils review on the state level,
Right.
and it's pretty much,
Yeah,
that
kinda
soil type is
confirmed
everywhere.
that. Yeah,
But
Are there alternate ways to fund? I guess, what are the mechanisms to fund bringing utilities into this site? Is rolling it into the cost of the project the only option? Or are there other ways to accomplish it?
I mean, you're probably asking about grants, and I'd have to look at what ones might be applicable here that, you know, could tie into a senior center housing. I don't know if you could piggyback it, if there's gonna be any future development, you could kind of. Yeah, John, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Well. Once you get into this scene, you know, and you get your basic town funding.
Yeah,
Which should be done in a way that covers everything. And in that process, if you can get through that process, we have found that there's a number of things you can find to get money that mitigates it. The idea, what we've often done with towns is that we go in saying it's a $10 million project. And the job of the 501(c)(3) is to raise 200,000. And there's possibility of these grants for another $500,000. And that could begin to mitigate the cost. But you often don't get, until you start moving ahead, it's very hard to raise money for something that is not yet set. The other thing I've found, and it's happened, I think, in several towns, is that our local reps often can get a, what do they call it?
Earmark.
Earmark. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's called backroom negotiating, I guess. But to give you an idea, in Hubbardston, they got $500,000 or $750,000. It was a fair amount of money. And that's happened in at least 2 of the projects, 3 of the projects that we've worked on. That takes some political work, you know, working with your, and that's another source. There used to be, and I don't think it's come back yet, but some government at one time realized that if we take good care of our elders, they cost a lot less. So the feds used to be able, we used to get a fund, and I'm not sure whether we still get the money, but whether we can carve off a piece of it. It used to be $25 million a year was allocated to community senior centers. And how that got spent, you know, sometimes it's for construction, sometimes it's for operations, for a bus or a truck. That is also another area that your state rep, state senator can help you with.
So if I could, I think we can acknowledge that the cost of the utilities or getting utilities to Bishop Road will be substantially above what Rod Harvard would get. But the question about the cost of utilities aside, in terms of the desirability of the location, the ability to build the structure, the ability to kind of position it in a way that is advantageous for the community.
Do site work.
What's that?
All the site work involved with getting on and off of the site. Staffing.
Yeah, where does Bishop Road fit in all of that kind of conversation about?
It's the best,
Yeah,
there's no question about it.
I mean, I was
A
thinking,
massive amount of land to work with, it's still material, put a trailer and put all the temporary utilities and put, whatever you gotta do, stockpile material.
I think
Anything you can imagine.
if you don't think about the cost, you know, which one is preferable, and I'm looking back at our ratings, most people were voting for this one.
Yeah.
So it's really, that's kind of the only, I think.
I don't think staging on the site is irrelevant between the 2 sites. I don't think it makes any difference in terms of construction and setting up, but I can't speak to your preferences. I think that's strictly
Yeah.
this committee in the town.
I think that Bishop Road is a more advantageous site if you're looking farther down the road that you want to do some kind of expansion, because once we take Groton Harvard, we're locked into whatever that portion of land that we take out from the school system is. That's it. We can't go anywhere. At least at Bishop Road, if we wanted to, we could always go back to the DPW and say, hey, we wanna, you think we can? They might not be there then, or we could always go back to the town and say, you know, this section behind it over here, we'd like to put some walking trails or some paths, or we want to expand a pickleball court or something
And
else
I
out
think that's a
there.
safer entrance and exit than on Bishop Road's a safer exit and exit.
Oh, of course, there's nobody on
Very
there.
good site.
Yeah.
It's flat.
I would say that in terms of, from my viewpoint, I think you get pickleball courts on both of them. And you do have one thing that we find that a lot of our centers, and I'm not pushing for either one. I don't care which site you end up on, but I can tell you right now, the school play fields are really huge for elders to come and watch the game or even use them to walk on.
But the problem is, oh, John, there's a hill, there's
I
a
even get 'em up
serious
there.
hill you get up.
And
I
I,
agree.
And either way, they're gonna walk a long hill up Washington, or they're gonna walk up a steep hill.
yeah, and it's the best thing you can do as a senior.
And
We want
one's
10
I can
flights a day.
guarantee you, no one's gonna do it.
No one's gonna
You
do
know-
it, exactly.
Well, I'm sorry, but I've got projects where we got people walking 10 miles.
I think
I mean,
this
that's
is a
not
really
true.
great example of how diverse it is to be a senior and how wide the needs are and why we need a larger, more capable building, because some people will have no problem walking up either one of those roads to watch games. Many users won't. So my concern is that there at Groton Harvard Road, there will be an expectation that there's a connectivity that won't actually materialize because of that hill, even though we sit in this meeting and say that. But there will be an expectation. And my other concern or caveat to this site is what is a short-term issue versus a long-term issue. So, I've heard some people say, I don't even know where you're talking about over on Bishop Road. Whereas I think once someone drives there a couple of times, even though it's unfamiliar, they'll get familiar. And so the hesitation or any barrier to use will be like initial, just the first couple of times, and then it'll be good to go. Versus if we don't get the traffic right here, or people don't like the traffic at the Groton Harvard Road site, that's not like the first time I use it, that's every time I go, the traffic is an issue. So
Maybe.
that's,
I think one of the advantages of, the Harvard Groton site is that it's really close to Autumn. It's close to the hospital.
That ain't gonna go there. The one that doesn't go, it's not gonna exist in 2 weeks.
Oh, no.
You have to realize that
Sure.
I'm really an optimist and I just cannot imagine, it going. I
Condos.
just cannot.
But I've seen 3 or 4 of them all over the place and they're outside of towns. They're not in the center where we're thinking about too. And also they're.
Which ones are you?
I was up in Maine doing a job. I was in New Hampshire. They're not in the center of town, they're
Well, I live R25 of them, almost all of them.
in the center.
Almost all of them.
Groton's way out of town, not even close.
Yeah, well, I didn't do Brown.
One of the things I'm concerned about, because I'm starting to hear questions from people about it, because we've done the program at Autumn Ridge. Cost, and people are wondering, how big is it? Is it state of the art? Does it have to be that much? And, there's questions about the, transfer station, whether there's any chance of, I don't know what they're worried about, but they're like, they just get this negative feeling about the transfer station, like, well, if it's a landfill, if it was whatever, is there gonna be odor, is there gonna be anything? And I don't know if we've done any due diligence on whether there's anything at that site that could impact the Harvard Road site. But that's a question I have, but the cost, and it is a significant difference in cost to go to Bishop Road. I like Bishop Road, I really do, but I am starting to get kind of worried. We're a small town and we are a small town.
we don't have a cost, we don't have a cost estimate.
Yeah.
It's in a
But, yeah.
small town almost, this town's grown dramatically. It's only gonna grow.
I want to make one comment in going elected that I have not given up on the electric utilities at Bishop Road.
Yeah,
I just gotta get right to it. Not given up on getting power at Bishop Road through that Bishop Road. Got 2 calls. I just want somebody to tell me positively, no.
yeah, I reached out to my engineer, like Ty and Bond, but he didn't get back to me. But when you look at it, we have a gravel access road, which is probably where you wanna run the lines down, and that ends up being about 1,500-foot run. But if you did it as the bird slides, it's 800 feet, but you're going up a steep hill through the woods and back down. So with that and access holds in, I don't know.
Yeah.
See, I'm not that versed in it.
Maybe if they
it'll
get
save
back
you
to
some
you,
money, but
if they get back
I
to
don't
you,
know
that'd be
if
great.
it's-
Time bonds.
So even if we did it off the transmission line, it might not be.
And then you're still not getting like Verizon, any of the other utilities as well, which you probably get from the time and the other points. So, I mean, it's good to look into.
So in terms of the utility cost and, you know, to Ellen's point, the cost of the entire structure, I think that there's going to be some sticker shock, I think, it's fair to say, that's new to the community, the cost of the building. I think for us, the job is to put that into the context of a 30 to 50-year-long investment in the community. And that if you amortize the cost over that length of time and the benefits that will accrue to the town as a result of having the structure, that's what justifies the cost. That is, if we can't, we have to be able to say to the community, this is worth the investment. And the one-time capital cost necessary to build the structure will be repaid to the community in any number of ways that we can then outline for them, whichever site that we're on, that the cost has to be amortized over a 30 to 50-year time horizon. And what are the long-term benefits to the town for it?
I think what might be helpful is if we had a conceptual cost for both sites, you know, at this point, because looking at Groton Harvard, you know, you're going to deal with some ledge, the stormwater basin, we have to underground that. I don't know.
That's true on both sites.
Costs.
You got underground.
But couldn't you do a retention basin or something?
We have a retention basin over.
On the Bishop site, you know,
Yeah, well,
you're plenty.
Yeah,
with sand.
we have a current retention basin at Washington.
Yeah, but the parking lot's over.
Yeah, well, it doesn't mean it doesn't go somewhere else. I thought it was gonna go somewhere else.
Yeah, so that,
Yeah, we're gonna slide it
I
over.
thought
on
it'd be
site.
undergrounded or something. But I mean, maybe you could move it. That'd be, I mean, it's simple. So anyways, I think it'd be nice to know, even, you know, we know the utilities cost more on this site. On Bishop Road, but maybe if we had it for each one, it might.
I could ask my civil engineer his comments. I would
Yeah.
say though that we flip this guy. We flip this guy back. There is space on the site. Right now, the nice thing about it is the chambers would be underneath here, where the current retention pond. But whether it ends up, you know, slide along here or over here, it isn't a very big item.
Yeah.
I would say that both sides, I would certainly, if we could do a surface retention, it would be less expensive.
Yeah,
We do a lot of under the parking lot because a lot of our centers are in towns, in urban environments, and you don't have that. Now in Wilbraham, we're right next door to a wetland, so we created our retention pond adjacent to the wetlands, and it's big. It's probably 150 feet long by 30 feet wide by 5 feet deep. It, by the way, doesn't retain much.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What's interesting about this retention pond, according to the drawings, is an outflow to the dump side of the street.
correct.
To another.
They always do that. Oh, they
So
always
that
do
goes
that.
under the road to another side of the street before it turns around and comes back under Washington Street in the other direction. Not in the same. direction.
Right.
So that when they designed that originally, that the capacity for that may have been undersized and they needed to go across the street to add capacity.
Yeah, and I haven't, it was as part of the landfill capping, that's when the basin we put in, that's kind of the proposed parking lot shown over. So that basin and the landfill basin we put at the same time, and then yeah, you're right, they discharge over near number 150, whatever.
Every one of them
Street.
requires a discharge.
I know that, but
Yeah.
that's what usually
Yeah.
is, we have one.
I don't know how they do
The
it.
second one.
And yeah, it's gotta be like, it's like a 30-inch, it's a pretty large pipe that takes all the drainage from up at the school and comes down into this basin. And that, you know, that's more, it's almost like a big forebay, basically, taking all the sediment out, and then it goes across the street to the basin at the transfer station. Which the transfer station takes the landfill drainage too. It's kind of cool. But yeah, I don't have any design data on that, but I do have drawings.
Well, in the final analysis, our engineers are really good at it.
Yeah,
You may, I know we're Ty and Bond's aware of how all that stuff works because they've been working in town for it to pick of rain, but I, I would say that both sites are doable.
So, to Dan's message, like how close are we to having some sort of a conceptual cost estimate? Because that comes from, that's part of your contract, right, John?
I already started.
Because I think that might,
Well, we only have, it's 2.5 months until the town meeting or less. And we have to be out promoting, you know, so we need to.
Robert, did you want to comment?
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. Just a couple of quick thoughts on where you are in the process. I think the first thing to keep in mind is ultimately the goal of the committee is to recommend a site to the select board as your charge for the project. So that being said, obviously, you're doing all of your due diligence and want to recommend the optimal site for the project. Now, of course, price is going to be a part of the viability of whatever is recommended. And as we all know, experience with public projects, no matter how much the project costs, somebody isn't going to like it. That's part of the process. But I think at some point, what would be helpful is we need to get approximate or we need to get cost estimates for both sites. The town's finance team, specifically the finance manager and our bond counsel and so forth, I think need to do some analysis and come to perhaps one of your meetings to discuss the costs. And what I mean by that is we have to do a definitive look at the borrowing capacity of the town for the borrowing piece. The good news is there are some things coming off the debt schedule. I think we need to look at the overall financial piece in addition to the borrowing component. Also, are there some other funding sources? And ultimately, at least right now, the lion's share of the project would fall into the realm of a debt or capital exclusion, which as many on the call know is a two-part process. It would have to be approved by town meeting, and it also has to be approved by a ballot of the voters of the town of Ayer. On the financial front, I think there's still some work that needs to be done and some due diligence. And we all want to get this, project, moving forward. From my vantage point, the timeline for the fall town meeting is getting very close. And what I mean by that is on my final point, just for the benefit of the committee, is on Wednesday, August 20th, the select board is going to officially open the warrant for the fall town meeting and approve the schedule for the warrant articles. And based on that schedule that they're going to approve, the warrant articles are going to be needed by Friday, September 27th, and the select board will review and approve those on October 1st. So we're coming up on a very tight window. However, as the committee knows, because the select board said this many times publicly, is that they are willing to consider, a special town meeting for the purposes of this project. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to address the committee. I think the takeaways are we need to get the cost estimates for both sites so we can do some further due diligence on the financial piece. So we have all of the information and the information for the public. And secondly, I think we need to be beginning to be thinking about the schedule for approval of the funding for this, and that the window for the fall town meeting is getting tight. Thank you.
Yes, it's
Thank
very
you.
good points, every one of them.
Robert, thanks for that. can I ask, would it be possible to get from the finance manager and the bond council or bond people, perhaps two or three, that is, if the number is, we'll give them three numbers and to compare and contrast, if it costs this, it's gonna be that, if it costs, you know what I mean? So that we can say, you know, the difference in price or the difference on the debt exclusion will be such and such depending. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
That we get three numbers from the finance instead of just one.
So, yeah, through the chair, to Mr. Curran's point, yes, Barbara could run some scenarios, just as you said, like, let's just say the number's $25 million. I mean, again, this is conceptual and at that point. The more specific is always the better, but yes, scenarios could be run and to see, you know, what on the capacity, the debt schedule. And this is more of her wheelhouse in the sense that there's also ways potentially in how we borrow it. There's a whole process to find out, you know, the optimal situation. Can also break it down to the estimated cost impact to the average residential tax bill, average commercial bill. So I think there's a lot we can do and will do, and be happy to meet with the committee. And I think getting the finance committee involved too with that process is important. But yeah, we can, we're here to, you know, work on that. But again, the more specific, the better. I also think, as we've discussed in the beginning, the more that we have other funding sources to the extent possible also greatly helps, you know, the case as we move forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Robert.
Yep.
All right, so just to loop back to those alternate sites, does anyone, the ones that are on that single page, did anyone like those more than what we're looking at here in the center of the table?
Well, I mean, and when I know that Carolyn originally walked up there with, that I think Ken and, for me, the Groton Harvard site was initially preferable, but a large portion of my preference for it derived from the fact that the building would have access to the playing field out the back, and that there would be kind of an easy way to perhaps integrate what was going on in the senior center with the use of the practice field during the day and that kind of thing. But it seems that trying to squeeze the building in there, both in terms of parking on travel on Groton Harvard and the availability of parking and the potential for more ledge there than down below, would argue against those sites. So what, I mean, for me, yes, I would concede that those sites are less viable than the ones that John has outlined as being further down. But again, the detriment for me is that then, you know.
Well, maybe what we should do is look at how the access could be to those fields. I don't know, we have not, this is a feasibility study. A lot of that gets worked out ultimately in final design, but we would like, I think it's worth our effort to look at that. And I would really, a lot of our seniors, good 15% have mobility issues, and they're not going to be trumping up to the fields. They won't even be using, if on a two-story building, be using the stairs, they'll be using the elevator. And there's a good reason for that. But there's a whole group of seniors who will tromp up to those fields or walk the stairs. I think we did a study in Holyoke where we found 87% of everybody who used the senior center used the stairs. And sometimes some of them didn't use the stairs because they went up with a friend who had a walker, but it was a very high percentage. And the one thing that we're doing, you know, is really promoting physical exercise, whether we do it with a fitness center, with, you know, with a treadmill, you know, or a bike or whatever, or whether you can do it outside. We're talking about having a walking track around the building. That is a real concern of ours, by the way. We think that's a pretty expensive item, but we're gonna have it budgeted in. And it's also kind of an aesthetic issue too, trying to work out, creating around the building. So, and we'll look at some of that when we get to the next level. But I can tell you right now, I'm gonna be 80 shortly. I just played a squash game for 2 hours this afternoon. That's me. I'm not totally typical, but it really makes a difference in physical exercise, whether it's yoga, walking, running, playing pickleball. You want a pickleball court? That creates a lot of activity. If I can play pickleball, I can walk up to those fields. So, I would just say, having the opportunity to walk to the fields and see games is a big part of physical exercise. And it's a positive. Not everybody can do it, for sure. But those that can will. And it's a positive thing. So I'm not trying to, we go over to the brush site. And there's a lot of interesting opportunities over there too, in terms of walking. But it's much more level. It's not quite as challenging. I think challenge is important. That's why we have stairs. Right?
But we still have the parking issue. Because there's no backup parking anywhere around there, and if we've only got 40 or 60 parking areas, and we have a room where you can seat 150 people for a special event, but there's no place for them.
Oh, we have
to
101 parking.
We're talking about these alternate layouts
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So we're 50 plus 5.
They both have 109.
She's talking about the alternates, the
So-
first one.
So
Oh, yeah, those
the
are
two
smaller.
main ones both have 101 plus 7 or
Plus
8.
7 or 8.
The
So
two
110.
alternate layouts, let's call them the two layouts next to the playing field. One has 50 plus 5 ADA, and then the other one has 63 plus 5 ADA.
They're pretty small.
So, yeah,
It's not
So-
viable.
You would like to have 100 spaces.
yeah, so I presume the reason that these alternate layouts don't include 100 like the main ones do is because it just wasn't possible to fit them in there.
Yeah, we were squeezed by both slope
Mhm.
and we wanted to squeeze them up tighter to that spot. We spread out much more, pushed out onto the side. On both sites, we tried to get 110 parking spaces.
Mhm.
That's, so I, in particular, like Dennis, was hoping that the building would be able to, fit up the street in these spots we just looked at here. But after I walked out there the other day on that site again, I found it to be not as steep as I thought it was going to be visually. Interestingly enough, I'm not so sure the grade shown on this, what we're looking at is right. But when I was out there, I found that you could walk. If you built a walk out this way, gradually, you could hook it up to the field, not steeply, but kind of work it around.
It could be AD accessible, actually.
Right, probably has to be, but if along more of a curve. Now, the other thing I had was a total blowout idea like yours.
I like this.
Ever
kind of
built
ideas.
a bridge, John, off the second floor?
Ah,
It may not be a hell of a bad idea,
To where?
right to that field. There's a short distance if you go right across off the second floor. The second floor is quite a bit
From
higher.
the field here, you can see the
Still gotta
elevation.
walk up to the
Yeah,
next
still
field.
do, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a trick, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, the town of the school
It's a
district,
trick.
the high school in Harvard has a bridge that comes off a second floor to access the parking lot at the Bromfield School. It's not, I mean, they just redid it. I wonder how much that was. Well,
also-
I'm gonna endorse yours, yeah, I think
It could-
Yeah,
my wild idea of,
It could also be
walking
something
track.
done at a later date.
Yeah, you could have.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to be all-
One thing too is we, the committee will still have to present to the school committee, and I know that the practice field is something they've thought about expanding in the future, so the closer we are to it, maybe it's not as helpful for them.
Yeah,
but
because
it's
you guys,
a thought to
if
have
you went in front of them and talked to the school, and you were talking about that site there now.
Right.
If we move it up further, we'd have to go back again and say.
also,
Yeah.
so we were scheduled,
Exactly.
She hasn't talked, we haven't talked yet formally.
Yeah, we have a formal talk with the school committee next week. Yeah, next Wednesday. So if I don't have the document in front of me, but if I remember correctly, looking at this one that's up there, it was the end was gonna fan out from the end of the practice football field, sort of that way, which was gonna must have involved some major grading, because that's where the steepest
Yeah, drop.
part of the drop off is.
One of the setbacks for them is the considerable drop off. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah,
You go out there.
a
look.
couple hundred
Pretty-
yards of.
pretty-
but I guess
Maybe
my
1,000
point is
yards.
either way, with either placement of the building, we're clear of that spot. Does that make, that's,
There's no question that the site that is shown there. The other thing that's evident when you get in there, there's a lot of nice wooded areas there, so you do get shielded from the street automatically. Or when you're up here and you get closer to the road, the traffic is gonna be much more evident that you're gonna go by the street. When you drive in here, this is gonna feel like a private spot. When you build it out, because there's protection everywhere around it. So it's a wooded, kind of a nice wooded site.
Swimming pool's gonna be really.
I think in,
It's
kind of
just difficult to get from there to the field.
circling back, I think I agree with Dennis. I like this layout, the most up-to-date one with the two driveway cuts on Washington. I like that better than the. Just personally, my.
I agree.
This feels like a pretty nice private site.
The one drawback on Bishop Road is the unknown about the utilities. I mean, you got some numbers.
Mhm.
I can tell you right now, unless you can get somebody else to fund the power, it's really hard to bury that into that budget. You're gonna end up shrinking the building one way or the other, because right now, construction is really high. It's not growing like it did 2 years ago, but it's still moving at a pretty good clip. I've not recently updated myself with my cost estimator, but I know that a year and a half ago, we were working on another thing, and the numbers were not pleasant. So if we took the numbers that we had from Wilbraham, which is the most recent, it's a pretty stiff number. It's about $750-800 a foot, not soft costs. Those are construction costs.
Mm.
Soft runs another 15 to 20%, depends what we run into in terms of, the nice thing today is that the bidding process is a lot less expensive because we do it electronically. It used to cost us $20,000 to bid a big project. We're bidding sets, but
Yeah.
we're killing trees left and right. We don't do that anymore. So there are positives that are helping us digitally in this business, but right now, unless we get a little bit, it's a double-edged sword. We get a dip in the economy, people feel less comfortable about spending money. And if we don't get a dip, it gets more expensive. So it's a balancing act. And when we do our estimates, ultimately, we can give you what we call our best guess estimate at feasibility. When we get into construction documents, we do it at 30%, 60%, and 90%. And at 90%, that's the goal number. And then we add in alternates that might help us. Things we really like, the bridge, or the, yeah. But, to give me an idea, in Wilbraham, we took all the alternates but the stage, which was an $80,000 item. But we took them after the bid because they came into a large amount of money from the Inflation Reduction Act, which of course pushed the price up, but I won't get into politics, but they added $2.5 million to the project because they had the money. And maybe Robert will tell us about that.
Can we go back and what were you talking about, the 30%, 60% of what? And
Of the construction documents,
Progress of the design.
as we progress the design, we keep wanting to know where the budget is,
Yeah.
because we may have to make adjustments at 30% or 50%. And at 90%, we hope we're,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I can tell you that, although I knock on wood, That's fake wood, right? This is real wood.
Yeah.
We're knock on wood.
Some would-
Our estimates, our feasibility estimates have been almost exactly on the final budget, but that's because we have to make adjustments as we go along that stay within the budget that we were predicting. Now, when you go to town meeting, you'll all have to work on these numbers because I want to be conservative. But if you're too conservative, you kill the project. And if you're not conservative enough, you get a shock down the road. So we have to, it's my most nervous time in my business, in my life, is for the bids to come in. It's very, because Massachusetts, it's file sub bid, it's wage rates that are set. And I don't know if the town decides they have some federal money in this, then we have federal wage rates. If we use state money, it's state wage rates. And because where we are in the state, the wage rates are a little bit lower where we are versus if you're downtown Boston. So those are all things that come into the factor. And I do have some very early numbers, which I don't want to throw out, but I want to maybe talk to Katie a little bit about it.
So did we want to move on
Yeah.
to the elevation?
How about the floor plan?
Yeah, the floor plan.
I promised my partner in life I'd be home by 10 o'clock.
All right.
You never
Where do you
believed
have
it.
to go to?
I'm going to an island in New Hampshire,
Really?
midway up,
How long does it take?
longer than I wish.
Yeah,
It's actually, I checked it out when I got here. It's about an hour, just shy of 2 hours in the dark.
yeah.
I'm sharing now the latest floor plan.
And this is the first floor, yeah.
Yes. One piece of feedback, I've been, talking to some of our current senior center users because it's easy access and some of our regular users. One point they brought up, John, is let's say, we've been talking about the large multipurpose room being able to be kept divided for lunch most of the time. And then joined into the larger space for big functions. But the patio is on the opposite side.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that, I think that's that way in Wilbraham as well. So some people are asking questions, well, what if it's a regular lunch day? And there's a midday program or exercise class or something going on, but we want to eat lunch outside. So
Yeah.
what are your?
Well, at Long Meadow, we do eat outside because it's dead center.
Right,
And the patio can be moved that way.
okay.
We wanted to also be somehow connected to the lounge library, because there's a lot of action there.
Mm-hmm,
There is a separate patio for the cafe out front,
right,
okay? And there's no reason why the patio doesn't come around. We just limited its size for now, but it could be smaller over here and come around and grab the rest of that.
So,
But go ahead.
so one thing for us to think about is it preferable that the patio connect to the library and be somewhat closer to the lounge, or is it preferable that it connect closer to the kitchen and the other side of the?
well, so you're saying that they're outside the cafe, not the library side, but the cafe side, so the front side of the building, there'll be space to have tables and chairs outside essentially the entrance.
Yeah, you could
From
easily just put a patio here, have one here, they're connected by the walkway. Right, it is not
Yeah.
smaller here, bigger over there. We have one here. Oh, that's the cafe.
Right, but you were talking about this.
No, she's talking about this.
So- So some of the feedback I got was, John, I'm gonna reach over you for a
Yeah,
second,
please.
was that this is where the line is here for that
Yeah,
partition, and that this would be set up for lunch for 40 or 50 people all the time. And then exercise would be going on all day long, kind of in this room. But if somebody wants to eat their lunch outside, they've either got to carry their plate through the exercise class or go out and
We'll move
go across the building, go down. I thought that was great feedback.
yeah,
Then on the
I-
other
I-
hand, though, you have to be considerate, obviously it depends a little bit on the site placement. But you also wouldn't want the patio right next to the service entrance to the kitchen and where the generator is gonna
It
be
would be,
coming and,
Yeah.
you know.
I think that's a great point, you know, and Dan and I will come up with an answer for you. I think
Great.
it's excellent. In Long Meadow, we don't have that problem because the patio is connected to the main. Our multi-purpose room is actually smaller in Long Meadow because they have a gymnasium.
Right, right.
And also, we did not do it here, and you may have seen it. If you've been to Wilbraham, it's not a raised platform, but in Long Meadow, we have a raised platform connected to the patio outside. And then for presentations,
Mhm.
we didn't do that here. We thought it might be a little expensive. But what we did do is we did this. We have a door that opens up all the way and allows both a performance or talk here and out here, or it can just be open between the two. There's no reason why this might not also occur over here.
Okay.
The actual patio is not a highly expensive item. The building is what it's all about.
Right.
And also we can put that on, you know, different ways of doing the patio is add alternates as part of hitting the budget. Just like we often put the movable partitions as add alternates because you can put those in at any time. We put the structure in for it now in the power, but we don't necessarily, and those, you know, this one here is an $80,000 wall. The one upstairs is about a $45,000. So those are add alternates. And we play that game because we want to hit the budget. You can, if you're within 10%, most towns dig into their contingency. I don't recommend that. I like contingencies, but because it's new construction, we generally carry maximum of 7.5% contingency. Our experience to date is that we've rarely exceeded up to 7.5 of that contingency. So we get kind of flexible down the end. If we see a lot of money left over, we can put the wall in it. So that's kind of what that kind of system works. So that's why we do estimates if we go too. And part of that estimate process is starting to talk with you as a committee as to what is a reasonable add alternate and what isn't. And we usually limit ourselves to about 6 add alternates. We don't want to get it too complicated for the bidders. Yes, I'm sorry.
The drive-up portico is still not there. Which
No.
is something I feel very strongly we need to have, because we saw it in one of the places.
Yeah,
people
you saw
trying
it
to get-
drop.
Wasn't Groton,
Well, they
because
have,
Groton has one.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about, we went to one of the sites and there was a van of special needs people getting off the van and having to sit in the snow in their wheelchairs and stuff, because there was no place to take them out that was protected.
well, all our centers have a porte cochere that comes all the way out to the actual spot where you get out of the van. If we don't go over it, and I'll tell you why we don't, because in many cases, you'll come in with a bus. And you have to raise that up to clear the bus. And if you don't, I can assure you, I've seen it, they hit it and damage it. So if you want to have you have to go all the way up to the second floor for that item to come out. And it's crazy. We avoid those like the plague. We've never had any complaints really about how we build it right out to where you exit out of whatever vehicle you're getting out of. And you go directly underneath the covered area.
So does this elevation kind of explain what you're talking about, Sean?
Well, have you been to any of these in the past? You've been to Wilbraham?
Right, yes, I've been to
Yeah.
Andover, but I think to Ellen's point, perhaps this would alleviate some of the. concern
This is the
about-
covered,
I've seen it.
yeah. And it comes right out if you look at. It comes right smack out to where the curb is. And this is a zero curb. It's you wheel your wheelchair right over it. You're immediately underneath cover. And there will be a couple of bollards there because we don't want people driving into the building. But we have found that effective. You can certainly talk to the directors of other centers. But when you do, I can give you some images. If you go down to Rochester, they have a porte cochere. And the one
Groton has one, but
yeah, but it's a very different building. Too. It's flat roof. But,
So if I look at the second page of elevations where it's giving sorry, it's taking a second,
here,
the actual heights for the second floor, I see you've noted the 13.6 inches,
just at the
with
floor. Yeah.
right? So like our van, for example, requires a 10-foot even clearance. So that gives you, Ellen, an idea of,
Well, any kind of structure has at least 18 to 24 inches of structure from the deck of the floor down.
right, but yeah, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's what I was trying to get a sense of, like, you could see, Ellen, where 13 feet, that's his 13.6, or I can't.
Yeah.
13.6, so you're gonna be looking at. That would be where the
Top of the
top
deck.
of it would be.
Yeah.
Essentially, because right, because it's 2 feet of structure and we would need 10 feet clearance.
well, I went over today to Devon's and looked at they have two hotels that have little Pittsburgh. And one is 12 foot and one is 14.
Yeah.
So you're saying we can't put out anything
How many
Yeah.
stories are the hotels?
about 4,
4 stories, yeah.
2,
2?
pretty sure.
Hotel, the difference.
2 stories.
I don't think so. No, it was pretty high.
Yeah. I've done a couple of hotels too. We do have porte cocheres, but they're large enough to have a bus that would take you to Foxwoods. Slide
Yeah,
in.
but we don't need that.
Well, but guess what? A bus like that can show up. And you cannot get underneath that. And we've had, in Duxbury, we built a porte cochere. And about 18 months to a year later, or 2 years later, a bus drove into it and dislodged the whole thing. It's just, it's a really, I can show you some images. There is another solution too. If anybody been to Chicopee, it's a lot more modern, but it's not dissimilar to the way we're trying to do the walkway. We could also, we did this in Lexington, Kentucky. We built right where these columns are in front. We continue them along and we projected up high, big cantilever space up high that clears everything so the buses can drive underneath. And generally a straight down rainstorm or something is not a big issue. But a lot of these things, right now, if I pull up with a van with handicapped people in it, I'm dislodging them right at the canopy. And you're immediately underneath that canopy. Nobody's sitting in the snow or in the rain. You may get a little damp.
That one that you're talking about doesn't have a cover over its sidewalk at all.
Which one?
Are you talking about Sudbury?
No, she's talking about this one right here.
The one that I saw where they didn't have
Yeah.
anything.
That's what you're talking about.
That's the Devon's.
Yeah.
Hotel.
Right, no, I'm saying the one you're talking about where people were sitting out in the snow.
Yeah,
was-
they didn't really
was
have
that
much of anything. I think
Yeah.
it was Sudbury.
Sudbury, but Sudbury
John, what-
didn't have anything.
What would that cost if we did like just even like a hip roof coming over with palms and where you can drive in? What would that cost? I mean, everyone, there's 3 or 4 of us here that are really adamant about having that. you know?
I can tell you another problem. We have a lot of seniors. If you go down to Stoughton, they've had the columns knocked down twice by cars because they go up and sit on. Let me send you some pictures of those to look at, and I will show you what we did in Lexington.
John, could you tell me the distance between the
Like 20 feet.
outside columns here and the building itself? Like how much space would there be in there for people to
Oh,
congregate or
that
something?
comes out about 20 feet, 25
It's
feet.
20 feet.
And it's got benches on it too, underneath it.
That's part of the covered walkway.
Yeah, oh no, but we go beyond there. This is the covered walkway,
Right.
which is like 8 feet,
Yeah,
and
to the
this
door.
comes out to the lot further.
door inside here.
And this can be adjusted any which way.
So, Townsend's a good example of one that has a covered area right to the curb, but not beyond it.
Yeah,
And
That's about 11.
between the columns, you can actually drive up in there if you wanted to. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
But you could, under a special circumstance, not the van.
That's why we
but a
put
car.
big giant bollards, so you can't do that.
well, do you think this is adequate?
I would like to see what it would look like with one on it. And understand the cost of it
Let's see what.
to know. I think if it's feasible and possible, I think it would be an asset.
Wait. Okay, let me just see where I can find it.
I think I'm gonna go with John on this one.
What?
Oh, my God.
But the concern would
Look
be
at the way he's got it designed.
by raising,
Cover the walkway, leave the curb. One people can get under their car and step right under the overhang.
that is that the fourth floor share is.
It's one of the other populations, I think it's gonna have to be even further up. I mean,
Where is that?
that
Rochester.
If the port, if the,
They've hit
if
those
the overhang is,
columns.
if the overhang
We
is,
do them in concrete.
if the overhang is taller,
Can you show
if that
page?
interferes with the second floor of the building.
It's elegant.
And
And
then
you
now,
have
what
it
are we gonna do? What's the fire suppression cost within that?
Oh, yeah, you have to
So you're
sprinkle.
gonna- you gotta sprinkle it.
Yeah, we actually have to sprinkle.
Yes.
We actually can show them that we make this in steel. It's not deductible, and they only have to do
Yeah.
wall
It's gonna
mount.
change it, it's gonna change the structure.
How
of the
much would
layout.
it cost?
Huh?
Yeah.
I can't tell you.
That'll be
So I'm
nice to
sorry,
know.
which community is that?
That's in Rochester.
Rochester? Okay.
Okay, I'll show you another one too.
But John, I think that's gonna, if we do what we're talking about, that's gonna change the whole structure of the building.
Oh, yeah,
Change the
yeah.
whole roof line.
It's dramatic. I can tell you, as an architect, Rochester is one of the ugliest centers I've seen. This is just, they think you're a country club or something with a lineup of limos. Now I'll show you another one.
What makes you think you're not?
We can't call this a country club. It's not.
No,
I had that shot down in one job when the selectman got cut up, said, we're taking care of a bunch of greedy old geezers, you know. But no, it's just embarrassing. Okay, now another one. No, let me see it. Check it, see it. Oh. Hmm.
I think say symmetrical, or do you think that's perspective?
We can ask any questions on the elevations, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, let's look at the second floor real briefly, because,
There were a couple of changes there.
yeah, we made some changes to the second floor. We reduced the glass going into the second. We moved, as you know, we moved the fitness over here, took the fitness area and put a divider in it, so you get two different classroom activity rooms. Left one activity room here, and we reduced the amount of glass to kind of peek in rather than glass all the way across.
Looking down on.
Yeah.
Although when I do my yoga work, I don't mind the girls looking at me.
Yeah.
I can get
Maybe you don't.
that.
I noticed that the, I don't know what you call them, dormers or whatever on the roof,
Yeah,
on this elevation, they look asymmetrical. Is that just
You're right.
perspective?
nope,
They are asymmetrical?
I hate symmetry as an architect, but you may love it. We did two things asymmetrical. We did this one reversed and this one the other way. It's more of a architectural aesthetic. The one problem I have with all of the elevations is the walkway. I'm not a big fan of it. We're trying to suspend it because if we had to build columns all the way around it, it would cost more. You wouldn't believe how expensive it would be to have columns around the walkway all the way around the building. So what we did is we're hanging it off the structure. I'm not a big fan of that either. I really think that what we're trying to do with that walkway, and I'm not disparaging it, except that we're trying to get a walkway that we would have had in a gym, that we don't have a gym, so. And I think we're artificially trying to create a walkway, which, by the way, in the dead of winter, with the wind blowing, snow blowing, I don't care if it's got columns or not, it's not a pleasant area to walk. It's good in the rain, probably, if it's a nice steady
I
rain.
don't think it's good in the rain at all.
I'm not,
How
My
wide
question
is that
really, how many
walkway?
people
we
can go
made it
outside?
quite wide. We made it about, I think, 6 feet wide. Go
I
ahead.
Six
don't
feet
care,
wide,
rain,
okay.
snow,
I'm sorry.
sleet or hail, I'm
I'm
like.
sorry, John, how wide?
What?
How wide?
You're what?
How
I
wide?
think we have it
I'm
6
out
feet
there.
wide.
If you go up there, like,
People have to,
Yeah,
or hide
At least 6
a
feet wide.
wall.
So when I was originally proposing this idea, I was envisioning it more like a farmhouse concept with a wraparound porch, which would include
Yeah.
the columns. But having the columns then would allow you to have added isinglass at some point later if you wanted, which, I'm sorry, that's a boating word, isinglass, like the windowed side
Yeah,
of a
I
wedding
know.
tent
Mhm.
as a thing later. This obviously doesn't allow for that, because I see your point here, that as this is designed at 6 feet with a cover over it,
We-
will help at noon in the summer and with a straight down rain, but it's not going to do anything for winter
If
weather.
we did columns, I can tell you right now that we'd be adding $750,000 to the project, more than that, probably.
How much does the roof overhang have?
it's a lot.
I can do that less, probably $250,000 to 300,000, because it's what we would do is it'd be a flat roof with a slight slope to it. We drain off the far end, and we would just hang it off the steel structure. And by the way, that's not, when I say just, it's not quite that simple.
I got a big problem with that, so.
Yeah, I know,
This whole.
I-
thing of-
we wanna show-
Attachments, all of the work, tied it in, weather tight, make it weather tight, keep it structurally safe, your big snow load, you'd have to calculate for that.
I would
Top of the
actually,
top.
I would have it 2 inches off the wall.
It's Still gonna, okay,
2 inches off the wall. I would not flash it into the wall. It'd be way, not only expensive, but it would be a cost factor down the road in maintenance.
I think it takes away from the look of the building.
Yeah, I like the idea of columns, okay? You can make them look really nice, and I can show you a drawing that way. But I can tell you, going all the way around a 10,000 square foot
Yeah.
footprint is a lot. of-
Robert, you had your hand up. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
didn't see you there.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I was just gonna suggest, and these are all very important details and so forth, but I was just gonna suggest that perhaps shifting the focus back to the issue of selecting the site, whether it's Groton, Harvard Road, or Bishop, and the criteria that the committee is going to use potentially to do this. I know that you did a rating exercise before, and perhaps that rating exercise could be done again, adding some categories. One which would be estimated price, which we talked about earlier, which we know some work has to be done on, and not for tonight, but price would be an added category. Accessibility, I can't remember because I don't have it in front of me, but I think sort of the two next key steps is, I think one is to begin to develop and shape the price issue, because that definitely is a key piece. And then, but also the shift back to sort of the site specific qualities that the committee is going to look at that makes one site optimal over the other. Not that all of this other information isn't important and all of these other details aren't important, but I think the first step, stepping back, is, okay, of these two sites, which one, all things being equal, if they can, which one is optimal and why? And then, of course, the other piece that we've talked about earlier, which we will start, is the price piece and the funding piece and so forth. So I think that's sort of a next big step for the committee is the criteria as to which site you're going to ultimately recommend. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Robert.
So we have and I'll stop this sharing, I'll see if I can find it, the list of criteria that we used initially. And we've talked a little bit. We've talked a little bit about that, but. Do people feel like they have a preference? Is there more information? We've talked about needing a cost estimate. Is there other information besides a cost estimate that individual members of the committee would need in order to, let's say at our next meeting, re-rate and make a selection? What are the other pieces we need?
So, this was raised earlier and it kind of, I've been absentmindedly not returned to it, but the issue of potential solar or solar panels on the roof, or the extent to which that would appeal to certain green members of the broader community, that the building is climate friendly and solar efficient and all the rest of it. Is that something we is that part of the conversation in terms of the design of the building or not, or?
Well, the last three centers, everybody would like that, on that.
Yeah.
We designed them for solar. Nobody's acted on it because the funding was not there. In fact, in Long Meadow, we designed the whole gymnasium roof to be a solar roof. We structured it for that. It's been now 4 years time. Nobody's moved on it. It was a good sales point, but you should understand that our centers, and it's part of the cost of this. I think I've talked about this in the past. It's your greatest cost for the building is not building it, but operating it. So when we do these buildings, we use closed cell foam. We use zip R panels. We get an R40 wall and R60 roof. And we use the stretch energy code, which has just been upgraded by the state. And we use ERVs, which is the energy reduction ventilation. I won't go through the whole story again, but solar is always an option. There's a flat section on this roof. Your best bet if you do solar is not located on the building, but located elsewhere on the site. Not sure how the
You said
site.
a good thing, John. You just said, when you build this building, we don't think about it on capital plan, we talk about it all the time. It's,
Yeah.
you wanna put an addition on, okay, your Omnia started with her budget is gonna have to get increased now.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's that gonna cost? Okay, so the building has to reflect what the costs are gonna be to run this building every single year.
Yeah.
Heat, electricity.
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And you know it's gonna.
And by the
keep going up
way,
and up.
we always say 30 years.
So I
That's
think
the shortest building. Be sitting here 100 years from now.
That should be one of the things when
Yeah.
we get started building, what
Yeah.
we, what's it gonna
Well, we
cost?
designed the structure to allow for solar. Solar is getting much better. 10 years ago, it was junk. It really was. Your panels last 15 years. By the time you paid for it, you have to replace the panels. The other deal too is that solar is daylight. So a lot of these, the best way to get it to work right is you buy the Tesla type battery packs. I have a son whose whole house is solar with Tesla battery packs, and he only drives electric cars, and he pays for it by charging them and selling it to the grid. But this building, we should always anticipate that we could put solar on it. And that should be said to the town too, that this building is set up to accept solar. The technology is changing. Right now, a Model Y that you would have bought 5 years ago is a completely different car today because of technology. So what we need to do is be prepared for it. And then let the town know that when the time's right and the funding's available, we can mitigate our carbon footprint and our overall operation cost.
That's fine. And what we need to do here, and Robert just told us that, we have a timeline right here.
Yeah.
And we need to pick a site between the 8 of us, 9 of us here, pick a site that we all agree upon, whether it's the accessibility, whether it's the utility cost, whatever. But we need to pick a site so we can move on to the next avenue. And we can talk about making a patio bigger or whatever we want.
Right.
I think we're way ahead of our game. Robert just said
Yeah.
that. We're way ahead of the game. We haven't picked a site yet. We need to finalize, we have 2 sites. We need to all come to conclusion.
Well, I picked the site, but I'm not saying
So-
what it is.
So, and I agree with you. So I think, I need to know the price, like I need to know how big the difference will be in the price. That will be part of the decision for me. What else? It won't be the only factor in the decision. There's 12 other factors that we're rating in, but for me, I will need to know what the difference in price is. Can everybody else offer if they have all the information they need right now, or if there's something else, because that's what our next work item should be. If we're missing pieces for everyone to make a decision, how do we get those?
I'm wondering if we need to do any kind of due diligence on the transfer station and how it could possibly impact, Groton Harbor. Maybe I'm way off on that. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
people-
you brought that up earlier. We conduct monitoring twice a year out there for landfill gas and for groundwater.
Mhm.
And there is zero landfill gas and the gas outside of the capped landfill. So the landfill, it was old trash landfill. It's been capped and we monitor it twice a year. The groundwater is, I have all the data on it from all that, which I could show you. I mean, I don't see it being an issue for the site.
Dan felt that, my Dan went there, went over to the site and said, I don't see how, I think people in their mind,
Yeah,
you know. When I was a kid, we filled pits with garbage and it smelled terrible. We don't do that anymore. Now, the other issue I want to mention about what you brought up, Katie, is that right now, both buildings being equal, same size. The differential right now in cost is about 1.1 million.
I think it's more.
because
Well-
of utilities.
Yeah, I'm guessing, the utility number you were kicking around was
Yeah, and that.
1.4, something like that.
Yeah, something like that one.
1.4, and the utilities for the other sites, probably 200, 250. In fact, I'd be surprised it's that much. We've done a lot of connections. It's in our budget, we would budget. I'm not sure how we do
And does-
Bishop Road.
And is that relative in terms of dealing with the stormwater runoff and the cisterns underneath the,
I'm not sure whether we'd have cisterns or whether we could very well have,
what's that?
We can handle that in the design.
yeah, we could easily have a retaining pond. It just, and by the way, all retaining ponds and cisterns all have an overflow somewhere.
Yeah,
And in this case, here, we know where we overflow it. I'm not sure if we did a pond, we still would have to look at how the pond overflows somewhere.
So we know there's a utilities differential, so without getting
That's
too
$1 million.
far into the details.
The answer to your question is, somebody wants an estimate. We cannot give you an estimate, for Bishop Road. It's impossible. There's nobody that can give us an estimate for the utilities.
Well, he already did, rough.
No, he's trying to give us an estimate, but he did the best he could, I guess, but that, if you want to use those numbers, we'll use them.
Yeah, no, he gave me the
That's what we
number.
got, yeah, I mean. that's
He
all
got
it's-
it from the guy who's
That's the only
gonna do it.
decision we have to make. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
so the,
What other pieces of information do each committee member need in order to re-rate and cast a vote for a site? Carolyn.
I would just say that I don't, the little rating survey thing is really inadequate to the process. Because, you have all of these different things that are given the same weight. But obviously, they don't deserve the same weight, bringing you in utilities from, a long distance weighs a lot more than.
that's how you rate it. You give it a very bad number.
Yeah, but what she's
Well,
saying is
but-
individually, the actual
Right.
category could.
Yeah,
category
so
Should
let
be
me
1 to
rephrase.
20 instead of 1 to 10 or 1 to whatever,
Right.
some
So-
will get more points or more.
Yeah, so then let me rephrase, in order to cast your vote for which site you would want. Is anyone missing any information aside from the cost estimate?
No.
So that we can come up with tasks for the next meeting.
I think we still gotta go to school committee and
Yeah.
and
Right.
you gotta factor that in.
Yeah.
I mean,
As
I think-
well, and that, that hurdle,
So
and with what
that's-
happened at Field 6, could have turned into another one of those issues.
So
And not
school
as
committee
likely, but
support,
it's always
Okay.
something.
and the,
and we'll get some sense of that next week. Yep.
right, that the school committee support, but also a sense from the school committee, I guess, of the school district about ongoing support in the, that is, our 3 years from now, is that relationship gonna be fraught because we seek to expand or they want to expand and you're kind of running into each other. So, you know, the size of the land that we acquire or not, or how that is, if it is in fact Groton Harvard Road, the long-term relationship, we will be married to, for lack of a better word, the school district for.
I don't think that's accurate. I think we would, as part of the next step, if that was the avenue we went, we'd want to make sure that the survey for the parcel included an expansion area that was as recommended by John, so that the school committee could give their support for
The whole
that whole
package.
package, not this, and then maybe later, maybe it would be parceling out, making a parcel to include that.
I would add one thing to that. I'm sorry, somebody wanted to. I would add one thing to it. We've been doing these centers now for probably since 1987, so. And I've probably done 25 that were built. Almost all of them were designed to have expansion. Only one was ever expanded, it was Duxbury, and they expanded exactly the way you should. But that's the only one that's ever, and the reason why is because once you get the funding and you get it built and it's really nice and everybody's enjoying it. It's with all the other things that come up in the towns, we never seem to be able to convince somebody to let us put an addition. You know, after a $10 million expense or whatever it's gonna cost, I don't know what it's gonna cost. But I really think that we should always plan for expansion, because in 30 years, I'm not here, and I don't know what's gonna happen, and it could happen. But the only one that's ever expanded was Duxbury, the Luxbury project.
So Dave, Ken, and Jim, I haven't heard from you guys. Is there anything else you guys need in order to cast a vote?
No.
No? Okay. All right, so it sounds like cost estimate will come from you, John.
Yeah.
Right? The question about energy and solar was answered. They're all built to be that way. The transfer station due diligence.
There's a term I wanted to get in, John knows what it is. The building is solar ready.
Solar ready.
Solar ready.
That's the
There
term
you go, that's nice.
That's the term that's used.
I'm gonna say that right here.
Because
Thank you.
And then Ellen, your question was about transfer station due diligence. And then, so Dan, would you be willing to write something that establishes that there is a process,
Yeah, I can provide
In-
just data based on what we have.
right? So that would
Some
then,
information, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I can understand why people are concerned about that, but I spend a lot. I have 2 properties that I take trash from, and I go to the transfer stations. You guys must go to it.
Oh, yeah.
Who-
Oh, yeah, it's really not a problem.
It's not a problem. I've never had.
I mean, you walk into that transfer station, you throw your stuff in the trash area and it's not a problem when you're even right there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
we
think
have
the
to-
fact that it's
Yeah.
up above and emptying into Washington Street
Changed a lot.
is a lot different from when it's right across the street and you're going out on Groton Harvard Road. So I don't
Okay.
think it would be as much of an issue.
so there's an answer for it either way,
Yeah,
a
That's fine.
data-based factual answer for how it's monitored and where it's going. So I think that would answer that. It's not an unknown, I guess it's a known. So cost estimate would be a next step that would come from John. School committee support would be something we'll have more understanding of after next Wednesday. It won't be resolved, but we'll have more understanding of that. So in terms of our next meeting, then it obviously needs to be after that. Does it seem reasonable that at our next meeting, if we have those 2 pieces of information, that we would be able to select a site?
I think we need to sell the site.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a need.
Okay,
You're exactly right.
because I think we really can't start scheduling, item number 5 on our agenda was public input sessions. I really don't think we can do a lot of public input sessions. We can do the homework to sort of tee them up. But I don't think we can start doing them until we have a cost estimate and one site. We can tell them that we had two sites and how we arrived at one. But again, it is as Robert reminded us, it is our job as the committee to make a recommendation for one. So in terms of a next meeting, I did preliminarily ask both the police and fire chief, because I know that was the next step. Once a site is selected, if they were available, because we've been meeting kind of every other Wednesday, they are both available on the 28th. If we wanted to try and tackle both of those things in one meeting, if not, we can delay them till the following meeting. But,
It's okay, nothing, we're gonna
Yep.
we're gonna talk about finalize the site that night.
Yep.
And then meet them and get their input from them too.
that, I mean, that is probably doable if we don't go into. We can talk about the floor plan as it relates to public safety, but we're selecting the site and then showing them that. Does that seem overly ambitious or does that seem
No.
doable?
No, and if they have any problems with it, it would be good to know right away.
Well, I mean, I guess they would have to be prepared to assess both sides. When they come here to talk to us.
Right.
If we hadn't said.
Right, yeah, I can prep them on both of them.
Yeah.
They've actually both seen earlier versions of the floor plan when they're here for senior center programs. I'm sorry, Ken, I couldn't hear you.
They're not gonna like Bishop Road, there's no water. You can't put a fire system, we have to put the water in before the fire department can say it's okay.
Yeah, either that or you have about a 20,000 gallon tank basement.
Yeah, good, but I think they're gonna be based on that.
Yeah, you have to have water.
Where's the water stop on Bishop Road?
It's by the railroad track.
So from there to the, what cost us, what would it cost to run water? 'Cause
6 inches.
you gotta put a-
Yeah, well, they
It's gonna need a
say-
sprinkler system, right?
Yeah, it'd be, yeah, oh, by
I
law.
think it was up to a
Six.
half million.
He's got an
Yeah, it was like
he's got an
400,000.
Yeah, there is.
But that's part,
I have the estimate.
Yeah,
That's-
why don't you put those together for me? And,
Yeah, 500,000.
really,
That's what I did for
is
water.
that on top of the electric?
right,
Yeah.
but that's part of the,
And the
that's part of
wastewater
the
was
one,
the cheapest. 'cause it was
that's,
septic.
that's part of our understanding that the utilities at Bishop Road will in fact be more expensive and
Yeah.
that to get water and electricity and to do the septic system at Bishop Road is gonna be like 1.4 and it's like 225.
Yeah,
or
I
whatever-
have,
or Whatever.
I have in the estimate. Utilities in the basic building estimate. So you would assume that we have whatever it takes to bring utilities off from a standard street.
Yeah.
Let's say like Washington Street, okay? That's in that budget, because that's the budget that we have for all of our projects. To give you an idea, in Wilbraham, we had to run. The town had to bring in a sewer system. They paid for that. That was no small effort. I think the town separately funded that with different funds. It was about 1.3 million. And then it got close to our building, but we still have to go as far as going to Washington Street to connect to that.
Yeah,
And then the water was the same way. We had a 6-inch line. I think it was maybe it was 8 for that building. Right now, all things considered, both buildings being the same size with the same issues that we want to deal with, we have roughly about a $1.5 million difference. So that's the premium you pay for Bishop Road. It doesn't mean you shouldn't decide Bishop Road's right. Maybe you make the building smaller, I don't know, in order to accommodate that.
yeah.
I can't do that decision.
Okay,
I think
so-
some of that for me would depend on the modeling
Yeah,
that Barbara does.
That's
To
right.
see, is there a mental
Another source.
threshold of one number versus another number for the average taxpayer or something like that, so.
Yeah.
All right, so in terms of our next meeting, before we go to, I haven't forgotten about public input, but before we go. For our next meeting, does the 28th, is that a reasonable period of time for you to have a cost estimate ahead of?
yeah, I'm already working on it. It's not my typical, I do a fairly large breakdown.
Mhm.
We don't do the kind of cost estimate we do for construction documents, that's 60 pages of stuff.
Right,
What we do is we take the numbers, we get a rule of thumb number that these buildings are being built for right now.
Mhm.
And then we add if we think the construction will start in the spring, if it all gets approved, we put in an escalation number and my cost estimator will give me that number. In the past, it's been as high as 8 or 9% for like 6 months. Now I think it's running much lower. If you follow inflation, it might be running 2%, 2.5%, but I have to find out where construction is. We'll put that in there. And then if it's delays beyond that, it's
Sure.
just a different number.
But will you be able to get
I
that
could have
number
that.
to me in enough time that I could?
When's your next meeting?
Well, I was just saying, if we met on the 28th, would it be reasonable for you to have it?
Oh, yeah.
Robert, how much time do you think Barbara would need before, if we wanted to meet again on the 28th, when would she need a cost estimate in order to begin to do some of those preliminary scenarios?
I
I just
can,
want to,
yeah, I can check with her tomorrow, Katie. She moves pretty quick, so I don't want to speak for her, but I think we could have something for your next meeting, at least the initial overview and discussion.
okay, great, yeah, so.
So I'll put together a cost estimate, get you to within about 4 or 5 days. And then you're gonna.
Yeah.
And then you get it to Robert and his team.
Okay,
And
thank you.
And I'm gonna be as honest I can with the cost estimate. I mean, I'm not gonna try and make it less. I'm gonna
No,
make it less.
we need a real
I
number.
know,
to
it's
work
gonna
with,
be a
right?
really real number, including soft cost. Now, I can tell you right now, in the end, our soft costs are sometimes ends up a little less.
And
But
what do soft costs include, just for
they include,
the uninformed among us?
geotechnical, architectural and engineering fees, publishing, for bids. Any legal, we usually have some legal costs in there. And one thing and Robert and his team will give us that, we usually also add in, financing, so any kind of number that might be related to a bond. And then there's insurance. Builder's risk, we usually put it on the contractor, but if towns have different attitudes about that. We'll hear back from Robert on that. But I think it's a hodgepodge of stuff. And then I also carry a contingency on new construction on a raw site. We carry 7.5%, and I think I mentioned earlier that we often don't use more than maybe at the worst 2%. But you never know it. A good example of one site. I was not involved in this, but they somehow missed all the boulders that were a foot underneath the ground, and it was a $2 million upcharge for the boulders on a public safety site.
Yeah.
We don't, that's why before we get into this, we do come in with our geotechnical guys, we drill.
Yeah.
We go down 20 feet or refusal. We might have refusal earlier.
Yeah.
But those are all the numbers that come into that, and I'll break that out for you too.
So one of the things, and Robert, one of the things that has come up in the past is, I know for John, the networking IT infrastructure within the building is not included as part of the design work that he does.
It's in soft costs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we will need, I'm sorry, so we'll need to kind of, I think, look at how we want to kind of do the network within the building and integrate it into the broader town or not, or how all that's going to play out.
So just through the chair very quickly, and I had mentioned this to Katie, Dennis, that the IT director and the facilities director are available and would like to meet with the committee at the appropriate time to talk about both of those. That both have some experience and expertise in that. So I think that's another on sort of Katie's list. Whether that's the next meeting or not, I defer to the committee, but they are aware and look forward to meeting about the IT component and the facilities component.
Thank you,
One
Robert.
thing there was just we have a budget item for it.
Right.
It's way too early to figure that out.
Yeah, we carry a bunch of items, but it'll be nice to hear from them. And also, I'd like to avoid what happened in Wilbraham. The OPM hired the IT guys, an outside contractor, and, it was like $60,000, and they wanted us, they put like in a small room, 6 speakers, 2x2 speakers. We don't need that. But they did it without talking to us, and I tried to explain to them that if you want a PA system, there's lots of ways of doing it, but $60,000 for speakers was.
Furnishings to budget as well.
Oh, yeah, we have an FF&E in that software cost.
All right, wonderful. So,
Just one thing on pricing.
yes.
I'm wondering if we should separate out certain items that would be, if we have money, then we would, you know, like I'm willing to say the co-share, I mean, the portico or whatever. If you want to keep that as if we have money, it would cost this much, or I don't know about the overhang on the roof or whatever other things people might want to.
So for this first
Budget
round,
separate.
the cost estimate, for this cost estimate that you're gonna do for our next meeting, will it include those?
We're gonna add a square footage for that walkway.
Okay, so
And
what
not,
was,
not 100%, it'll probably be 60% or 50%. So we're gonna take that 6-foot walkway around the building and added that into your square footage will go above this. And then it's, you know, $700-800 a square foot. So we'll carry that as a separate item.
okay, so
if you look at-
those add alternate.
And if we
things.
do it with columns, it'll be more expensive than if we did it without columns.
Okay,
And I agree with you, I think without columns, it's kind of an odd thing.
so that, but I guess I was just clarifying
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
that
yeah.
will be delineated in the cost estimate.
yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Wonderful. So before we go to public comment, does the 28th at 6 p.m. that Wednesday work for everybody?
Yeah.
What day is that?
The August 28th, that would be 2 weeks from today. Anyone have a, okay, all right.
I don't go to
Great.
festivals till 29th.
So I think that brings us to public input. Is there any public input?
I will leave all
See
the.
any hands
I
up?
was looking at, I was looking following back.
No, she.
Recycle.
Where's your hand?
Well, I think
So then if there is no
I
public
still was
input,
recycling.
then we have a motion to adjourn.
Here, one more. question.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
John, are you confident that we would only have to make minor tweaks with the Washington Street from here, or would we we asked you two firm to take a look at the 2 pieces up the street. I think we all agree we're not gonna do that. We're gonna concentrate on this.
they did not work well.
Right,
because
but
some
my
slope.
question is, when we look at this site. Is there a possibility even to move the building over here and, you know,
Well,
are we gonna look more at that
At
in
the-
the future, like
Yeah,
final construction?
you're right on it. As a feasibility study, we're trying to get a ballpark where we are.
Okay,
Final design,
Yeah.
when my civil engineer comes in, he's very anal retentive. And he will, I try and guide him a little bit, but he really is. And we will talk about handicap access up to the fields and also maybe a stair or a bridge. This was a mistake. I'll get
Yeah,
that fixed to you and send it to
it's not a
you.
problem.
But I really like where it is here. I like it where it is on Bishop Street. I think they're both the right place on those sites. And is there room on these sites? Yeah, there's room on both of them, but I can tell you, my experience is, let's plan for expansion. Good luck if you ever see it happening, because it just doesn't get funded.
Yeah.
The answer is 10 years from now, like in Belmont. Hey, we just built you a new center. What do you mean? You know, our school's 50 years old or whatever, you know, it's the same art, and town meetings are really exciting. I have a lot of them.
And I think that's
Yeah,
just a great reinforcement for the importance of building it correctly.
correctly, the first time. Oh, yeah. You know, the one thing about these centers is the multi-purpose room really needs to be a fixed element. That's really hard to expand. Expanding on more function rooms and things like that in terms of classrooms and things, that's all a great possibility. But the kitchen and the multi-purpose room and service entrance are they tend to be pretty fixed. It's all struck, and by the way, although we'll get into this if we get to a construction drawings. I'm pricing this as a steel building. Not a wood frame.
Right.
We've had lots of problems with movement and safety and flammability, and steel is the right way to go. Now I will shut up. Cause I have to go home too.
Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Yay, wonderful. All
Thank you,
right,
good job.
adjourn at 8:01.